Colleagues, it's the appointed time. We have already formed a quorum, and first thing to do is to elect a chairman. Mr. To, I'd like to nominate Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Any seconder? Mr. Ronnie Tong second. So, Mr. Wu, do you accept the nomination? Yes. Any other nomination? If not, then I declare that Mr. Wu elected. So please take over the chairmanship here.
Okay. Thank
you, members, for your support. I'd also like to ask if you'd like to have a deputy chairman too. If you don't think it's necessary, then we'll go straight into the scrutiny of the legislation. All right, let's invite the administration team to join us. Are we inviting them to join us? Yes, thank you. We'd like to thank the government officials for coming to today's meeting. They include Mr. Howard Chan, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, and Mr. Samson Lai, Assistant Director, Mr. Lawrence Lau, Principal Environmental Protection Officer, Mr. Michael Cheng, Officer in charge of RTS Development, and Ms. Alan Chong, Senior Government Counsel from the DFJ. So first of all, can I invite the administration team to walk us through the proposed legislation? Yes, thank you, Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to brief you on the two pieces of subsidiary legislation. The two pieces of subsidiary legislation are introduced to implement this waste diversion plan in order to avoid the situation whereby in the course of collecting municipal solid waste that might create problems if these points are located in densely populated urban areas, and after waste compaction will be transferring the refuse through completely covered vehicles to the relevant or designated points in order to avoid causing nuisance to the areas. We also have measures to improve these refuse collection vehicles in order to comprehensively improve the performance of the process. First of all, with regard to the DWDF regulation, the Designated Waste Disposal Facility regulation, it provides that all vehicles have to be equipped with proper metal tailage cover and also a wastewater sump tank, or collectively called specified devices, in order to prevent water seepage and also the falling off of dust or refuse. And to do this, we also have to offer a one-off subsidy scheme so that for private collectors they'll be able to retrofit their vehicles with the above-mentioned facilities in order to meet the standards. And also with regard to the 7 transfer stations, we also propose that there should also be an amendment regulation so that for Island East and Island West, the waste charging would be lowered to $30 per ton, and then for the Sha Tin facility, it also will be open to private collectors. So in line with other facilities or administrative measures, we believe that we should be able to deal with the MSW, and we will also be able to minimize the impact on the environment and also on the traffic, and the EPD will also be gradually adjusting the service routes in collecting refuse in order to make better use of the residual capacity of some of the existing transfer station, and we will also be able to absorb or take on board some of the diverted MSW, mainly from the private collectors. With the two pieces of subsidiary legislation, if they are approved, then in accordance with the actual progress, including the expansion of the landfill funding proposal and also other preparatory work, we will be deciding on the commencement date for individual pieces of legislation. So much for my briefing. Thank you. The floor is now open to members. Any members who have any questions? Ms. Sito, Chairman. With regard to the refuse transfer station, it's not just there are not just three. It's not just the two on the Hong Kong Island and the Sha Tin facility. If I got it right, well, with the proposed adjustment to the charging scheme, it will only involve the three transfer stations, so that would provide some financial incentive for the private sector to make better use of some of the unutilized facilities. So can the administration tell us, given the number of transfer stations, what is the capacity and to what extent have they been utilized, and also with regard to the sea route and also the land-based transfer, what is the ratio between the two? Well, after lowering the charges, after lowering the rates, what will the impact be in terms of the diversion? We are not just talking about Cheung Kwan O. We do have two other landfills, so we like to look at it as a basket of measures instead of just looking at it from the perspective of reducing the waste going to Cheung Kwan O. I really want to make sure that in the different pieces of legislation we can have a comprehensive picture, and we can have a blueprint as to what needs to be done. We need to know the policy. All right, quite a number of members have raised their hands. So everyone will be given 7 minutes, including the question and answer. Well, they don't have to answer the question. I'm just trying to get some information from them. So they don't have to answer it right away. I think that's very important too, because last time at the EAP, we also asked some related issues in terms of the overall planning and so on. All right, 7 minutes each. Next, Gary Chen and Charles Mock and Ronnie Tong. Administration, please. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the member for her question. With regard to the present transfer station network, yes, for MSW, about 60% is transferred via these stations every day. We are talking about over 7,000 TPD being transferred, so it's about 63%. With regard to the utilization rate in Annex B, we have already set out the details. Well, we have 7 transfer stations, and the 4 main transfer stations, if the SENT landfill stops to receive MSW, then these transfer stations will have the biggest chance of receiving the MSW, that is Island East, Island West, West Kowloon and Sha Tin. For the others, as they are located either in NT Northwest, Lantau or the outlying islands, then the chance for them to take over or take up the diverted MSW would be rather slim. That's why mainly we're looking at the 4 existing urban transfer stations. As far as West Kowloon is concerned, the rate is already $30 per cubic ton. But then for the remaining three, Island East, Island West, and Sha Tin, well, as Sha Tin is now not open to private collectors, that's why there is no charging at all. So our plan is that for Island East, Island West, and Sha Tin, the rates or the fees will be adjusted so that they will be aligned with that charged by West Kowloon, so that the 4 transfer stations will be able to maximize the utilization rate, so the private collectors will be able to make use of all 4 of them. Through this, we hope that we can have an orderly diversion of MSW to these 4 urban transfer stations. At present, every day, we have about 5,500 TPD being transferred to the landfills via sea route. And then out of the 4, 3 also have direct seafront access. So with the diversion scheme being implemented, we expect that the percentage can go up from 40% at present to about 60%, so that about 60% of the MSW can be transferred to the landfills via sea route. So on the one hand, for the residual capacity of the existing landfills, they can be optimized, and then we will also be able to transfer some of the MSW via sea route. Ms. Sito, I hope that the administration can provide us with further detailed information. Yes, in Annex B, you have a breakdown of the figures. But then in the footnote, you talk about seafront access. But then to what extent is it being used, and what's the ratio between sea and land transport? And then for the Island East and Island West transfer stations, well, I imagine we are not going to transfer the refuse from Kowloon West to Island East or Island West, right? So that should not happen. So Island East and Island West will mainly be serving Ap Lay Chow or Aberdeen. So they will mainly be collecting refuse from these areas. So even if the rates have been adjusted, they have not been able to maximize the capacity. So we will not be generating unnecessary waste. So the fact that the 2 transfer stations on the island have to lower their rates, well, after all, you have to use them anyway, because they are actually collecting waste from Hong Kong Island. So I do not see how that can be done, in particular for the 2 transfer stations on the island. How are you going to increase the utilization? Because after all, we are talking about a fixed amount of waste every day. Yes, we can provide you with further information about the transfer by sea. Well, we believe that the 2 transfer stations on the Hong Kong Island will be able to play the role in diverting some of the waste, because if there are private collectors, well, their route in the past might pass through Hong Kong Island and Kowloon, and if they can replan their routing, then they might be able to make better use of Island East. And then for the sea transfer, well, for Island East, it has seafront access, and therefore for the collectors, their route can also be diverted to the 2 stations. So whether or not it's collected by the administration or collected by private collectors, they can make better use of the 2 transfer stations on the Hong Kong Island. And if we can adjust the rates there, then we hope that that could also provide an incentive for private collectors, because there is also seafront access for these 2 transfer stations. We hope that they can make better use of the seafront access for the 2 transfer stations. All right, Ms. Ho is asking that, well, after the adjustment, she'd like to know more about the routing for the different collectors, so that we'll be able to tell exactly whether or not they will become more attractive to some of the refuse collection vehicles. If we do not know that, then we will not be able to tell whether or not the adjustment is sufficiently attractive to attract more private collectors to use these facilities. I can provide the existing alignments or the routes, so that for existing FDHD and also private collectors routes, Well, but then we will also have to consult them, and the EPD and the FEHD will also have to replan their new routing. So for the future route plan, we might not have all the details with us, but then whatever we have, we are more than happy to provide that to you. All right, what kind of objective would you like to achieve? So what kind of routing would you like to achieve? So please do provide that to us.
And whether the fee change will reach the goal. I think that's what we need to consider. Chair Ken? Thank you, Chairman. Two parts. First, I was asked by Chiming to ask a question because this regulation may affect the waste transportation trade. So I was told that the trade wants to express their views here. So, Chairman, could you consider whether we can hold a public hearing on this issue? And secondly, I'd like to follow up on Sid Ho's question. Chairman, you know that in our Environmental Affairs panel, when we discussed the issue, many members thought that now you are forbidding private vehicles, refuse collection vehicles to Chung Kwan O, forcing them to go to other stations. But in fact, those other refuse transfer stations are already at full capacity, so they may not have room for these private vehicles. So actually, there's just not enough stations there. So ultimately, you may only be forcing more refuse transfer vehicles or collection vehicles to remain on the streets. So can the EPD give us a complete picture on whether, at the moment, what's the capacity at each transfer station, and what's your estimate for the situation? Will it be changed after the new regulations come into effect? Now that you've given me a table, we have the feeling that this table still hasn't given us a full picture. I think you need to give us an assessment after the Chung Kwan O station is closed. You need to tell us what percentage, say 20% or what, of vehicles will go to Kowloon West Station, or 30% will go to Sha Tin, or say 10% will go across the harbour. So that can give us a better idea and to help us assess whether the fee adjustment can reach the goal. That's very important. I know you wouldn't have the data with you now today, but I'd like the government department to tell us what's your assessment like at this stage, whether the other stations can absorb the private vehicles that will be banned at Chung Kwan O, or would they need to pay extra to go all the way to Tai Kling to dispose of the waste? Chairman, yes. I think the information requested by Mr. Chen, we can provide them to him. And as for the latest scheme, I think the major goal is that even though some of the stations have not much spare capacity, but through the adjustments in routes, I think there will be room for adequate surplus capacity at the stations to accommodate the about 2,000 municipal solid waste. That is the waste transfer from other places. But as for the actual data, I need to give them to you later. But maybe my colleague, Mr. Lai, could supplement. Yes, when we work on the regulation, we considered that if the Chung Kwan O landfill is designated for only construction waste, we carried out a study and we found that the landfill only accepted 2,000 tons of waste, and of which 1,800 were handled by private collectors. And we had begun to get the department to see how to handle the waste involved. I think for the other transfer stations, there are still surplus capacity there. Not a lot, but there's surplus capacity. And the EPD can also, through replanning of routes, to let these waste go to stations with more surplus capacity. So in West Kowloon and in Sha Tin, the transport stations there, through the realignment of routes by EPD, there will be about 1,800 tons of capacity made available for these private collectors. So this is why we think that now is time for us to implement the regulations. But for individual private collectors, what are the routes like? I think that will be our next stage of work. But on the whole, in terms of hardware, there's room for accommodating these weights. Yeah, thank you for giving us this idea that you've carried out an assessment. I hope that next time when we meet, please give us two set of data. One is on what transportations you expect the private collectors to send their waste to in terms of percentage, and secondly, the routes of vehicles run by EPD. Last time at our meeting, we heard that if all the room was given to private collectors, then the government LTS or LCVs would be forced to go roundabout way to a designated landfill. So this would cause all these LCV to go a long way to go around the territory. Well, okay, I'd like to ask about what government plan there is on the routes of government refuse collection vehicles. Chairman, I can tell you clearly for the waste private vehicle operators, I just want to know the percentage or what percentage of them will go to the stations. But I think we can get the government information on the routes of government vehicles to us. I think the EPD and the contractors are trying to make use of transportations in, for example, Hong Kong Island or other transport stations not so well used. So we will reserve those stations for the private operators. And as for the 4 stations that are going to lower fees, and we also will hope that there will be room made available for private operators. Charles Mock. Looking at the regulation, there's the mention in the document about the equipment for vehicles. We have said a lot about the need for better equipment to prevent water seepage and so forth. But the clauses on regulating the equipment are very simple. For example, the installation of a metal tailgate and a wastewater sump tank. But within the trade, what do you think? Do you think that's enough to make sure that the vehicles are properly equipped? So are you sure that you can ensure that there is proper equipment in place? And also, apart from vehicles, as we mentioned, some waste are transported by sea. So for the ships carrying the waste, would there be any regulations on them? I know that the sea transport may have a different kind of impact on the environment, but what if waste are dumped into the sea along the way? Or do you think it doesn't really matter much? So do you think there's a need to actually include a provision on regulations on sea transport? Yes, Chairman. On the equipment of the vehicles, this August we carried out a pilot scheme with the trade in which we subsidized a number of vehicles in the trade so they can be equipped by the metal tailgates and wastewater sump tank. During the process, we had experts from the electrical engineering department and also representatives from the trade to carry out the pilot scheme. And the result proved that the equipment mentioned could remove odor and also prevent water seepage. And the extra equipment was accepted by the trade. Apart from the regulatory demands, we will also issue an executive order for the trade, to follow and also to distribute to garages. And before the vehicles are refurbished or retrofitted, the trade would actually make the application involved to the electrical engineering department. each vehicle may be different in terms of size and so forth, so their type of retrofitting may differ. So once the approval is given by the electrical engineering department, then the retrofitting can proceed. And after that is done, the vehicles need to be scrutinized or checked by the government department to make sure that they are in line with the required standard and the legal requirement. As for sea transportation, right now we do transport compacted waste by sea, so they can be sent to the landfills. Now we actually have compacted the waste and put them into a container so that the containers will be loaded onto a ship. So all the containers are sealed, so I don't think there will be any chances of seepage. Okay, Chairman, I'd like to follow up on the vehicles themselves. You said there will be guidelines issued. Are the guidelines ready? Can we have a look at them? And you seem to mention that the electrical and mechanical engineering department would actually approve the retrofitting to be done. So is it that only approval from the electrical and mechanical engineering department is needed? Or would they just get promises from the operators that they will install the equipment? Is there any provision in the regulation to make sure that the operators must comply with the guidelines? Yeah, department. I think maybe I'll ask my colleague to explain to you later on the terms of the regulations. But right now, there are some private vehicles that are already equipped with the facilities we asked for. Well, we want to see it, but they are not up to our standard. So we're going to give them subsidy, even if these substandard equipment will have to be, we'll have the vehicles given to us, given to the electrical and mechanical engineering department, and it will discuss with the garage on how these vehicles, these equipped vehicles, to make technical improvements. Only when the electrical and mechanical engineering department is satisfied will the proper retrofitting be considered finished. If there's a need for further adjustment in the vehicles, approval from the department is also needed. So all vehicles must comply with our requirements. So in other words, the government department's approval, is that part of the or is that included in the guidelines? And secondly, does the law refer that or require that people need to make reference to the guidelines? Mr. Lai, I think the law does not only just require for the installation of metal tailgates and the wastewater sump tank. There's also a requirement on the structure of these equipment. That is, they need to be made in such a way that they're safe to the operators and will not interfere with the operations of the vehicle. And that's why we need to make sure that the vehicles are retrofitted in such a way that they're safe and will not cause any nuisance. So the goals are listed in the provisions. And the guidelines are also shown in our subsidized scheme. And we had already carried out a pilot scheme to test the feasibility of these measures. So we have accommodated, address your concern about whether the requirements, actually are valid. So if you have the guidelines, can you give us a copy so that we can make reference to them? Yes. Yes, I think I know you've given us a lot of background information, but you still haven't answered my question. Have you stated in the law that whether compliance with the guidelines is necessary, and when the electrical and mechanical engineering department's approval, is that stated as part of stated in the guidelines as a requirement? Yes. Okay. The approval of the department is part of the is required under the subsidy scheme. And the law enforcement is the Environmental Protection Department. As I said, the department will need to make sure that the equipment concerned are safe and will not pose any environmental nuisance. So when we issue guidelines to the trade, we'll tell them that the guidelines are also actually form part of our enforcement of the law.
I think Mr. Mock would like to know if that would also form part of the guideline. Chairman, we did consider this, but then as we can see, for different vehicle models and make, in the actual operation, different vehicles might have different specs or specifications. That's why we just like to set out the objective to be achieved, and then there will be this administrative guideline. We believe that that would be more flexible, and if that should form part of the legislation, then we are concerned that individual vehicles might not be able to meet the required specifications. I don't want to dwell on this, but then I'd just like to take a look at the guideline, and I'm not suggesting that it should form part of the legislation, but then does the legislation provide any role for the guidelines, so you don't have to explain the details of the other subsidy schemes? Well, in simple terms, I think the administration should provide the details, and then and also the guidelines, and then we can discuss that further. Mr. Ronnie Tong, well, in this regard, with regard to completely covered vehicles, I think the specifications are too loose. I do not accept the response from the administration just now. With the subsidy scheme, I think it is a different story from the proposed legislation, because under 3B is a criminal offense and the owner could be subject to criminal prosecution. But then if you look at the details here, well, they just talk about a metal tailgate cover and a wastewater sump tank. And then under 3B, they just say that well, the construction of the cover and a tank must be suitable for the following purposes. So there is no need that the effect is achieved. And then under the one-off subsidy scheme, if there are other vehicles which have a half cover, and if they say that the purpose is to achieve the objective under 3B, then would it be treated as an offense under the law? Then I would find what the administration said today totally unacceptable. Should we include the guideline as part of the legislation? Yes, that could be subject to further discussion, but then I think the subject is a lot broader. We should have more specific technical specifications being set out here. In many pieces of legislation, for example, under our road traffic legislation, and then for goods vehicles with regard to the dimension, and also for signage and the size of that, we also have diagrams showing how big they should be, so that people will have a very good idea as to what would constitute an offense, what not. But then under what is set out here, under 3B, honestly, there will be a lot of gray areas in the future, and your subsidy scheme is a one-off thing, but then once this legislation is enacted for the foreseeable time, that would still be in effect. So how about those guidelines? Will these guidelines by a certain time be outdated? Or could it be that they think that they have already met the requirement, but then if they are still not up to standard, then will you be prosecuting them? That's why I find what the administration said today totally unacceptable. I'm not just asking for the guideline. I hope that next time when they come again, they will have to come up with a more specific response as to how they're going to deal with this problem. The next issue is about enforcement. In particular, in Changhua-no, we all know that one of the biggest problems, which has been the subject of many complaints, that's at the car park. Before the weighbridge, you will have to measure the weight of the lorries. So before you do that, they will be just fly tipping the refuse. So it's not about the refuse problem, it's about law enforcement. But then if the administration has difficulties because for many years you have not been able to resolve the problem. So you should have taken the opportunity so that for people who are involved in fly tipping of refuse, the penalty should be substantially increased, because nobody cares, nobody can be bothered. Have you seen the pictures? They are very scary. You can see piles or mountains of refuse. They can have trucks just dumping the refuse on the roadside, and that causes a lot of nuisance to the residents nearby. So why have you not taken the opportunity to increase the penalty for fly tipping? And you will also have to step up enforcement in order to meet the expectations of the residents. So can you respond to that? Administration, how about increasing the penalty? Why are you not able to do that? Well, for the technical guideline, I think we can provide a copy of the administrative guideline so that you know the details. Yes, no, that's not what Mr. Tong is asking for. But then after reading the guideline, then you will know exactly what is in it, and then you will know whether or not it's appropriate to legislate and incorporate that as part of the law. Because for every vehicle, the technical requirement and specification will be somewhat different, and therefore you cannot come up with a set of across-the-board guideline or technical specifications requiring them to retrofit it with a metal tailgate cover and so on. That's why we just provide them with this set of guideline on the technical specifications, and then they'll see how they can comply with it. But then we have noted Mr. Tong's concerns. But then even here, it doesn't say that it has to be completely sealed off. So you will have to make it clearer. You just say that the metal tailgate has to be there. And even for the wastewater sump tank, there is no mention here that it must not leak. So if they have the tank there, but then what if it leaks? So can you still prosecute it? So it's not about the guideline, it's about the specifications, because the guideline is another issue. But then how are you able to achieve the target? It's not just about the objective. And why can we not increase the penalty for fly tipping on this occasion? Well, I would also like to put in my view here. Alright, after this is set out in the law, will that result in your inability to enforce the law? Chairman, it's not about the specifications, it's not about the size of the facility, but then with the tailgate cover and also the sump tank, you must not cause any environmental nuisance, and under the existing amendment regulation, you will have to meet the requirement. So the purpose of these facilities will have to achieve a certain purpose, and that would be the yardstick for enforcing the law. So it's not about the size of the tailgate cover, it's not about the thickness or whatever. Yes, Chairman, I understand what the Deputy Director is saying, but then I'd like to remind him that the objective is not our biggest concern. We are most concerned about the outcome and the effect, because very often, even if you have the objective or intention, you may not be able to achieve the target, because you never said that the cover would have to be completely sealed off, and for the sump tank, it doesn't say that it must not leak. Yes, with the different sizes and make of the vehicles, the specifications might vary, but then you will have to make sure that they will be able to achieve the purpose or the target. So you will have to set that out very clearly in the law. Alright, there are two parts to his question, because under 3B, you also have the objective, and then it says that if you cause any environmental nuisance or danger, then that could also constitute a reason for enforcing the law. Assuming what Mr. Tong just said happens, will you be able to enforce the law if the cover and the tank are not completely leak-proof? Alright, under 3B, it specifies that they will have to have a tailgate cover and also a sump tank, and that they will also have to achieve the objectives set out in the law. And thirdly, the facility must be in good working condition. So if the devices are not in good working condition, then that would cause nuisance, and that would also constitute a ground for enforcing the law or taking action. So we will we will review the guidelines. We'll see how we can set it out more clearly, and then we'll discuss with members. How about the other question about fly tipping? So I'll ask Mr. Lau to explain. Thank you. With regard to fly tipping of refuse, in particular in some of the car parks and roadside in Changuano, in fact, as you can see, we attach a lot of importance to that, and we've been working with other departments. We do have regular meetings. We do mount regular joint operations. We hope that through such efforts, we'll be able to reduce such fly tipping of garbage by refuse collection vehicles. We've been doing that as an ongoing initiative, and we will continue to do that. As regards law enforcement, the penalty is not light at all. The maximum penalty could be $200,000, but then we have noted Mr. Tong's concerns, and will review whether or not we should further increase it. Thank you. Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry I was late. Well, I heard what Mr. Ronnie Tong just said in terms of his proposal and his demand. I support him, because the administration is saying that it should be in good working condition, and then you'll be able to decide if they are in breach of the regulation. But then you also have to set it up more clearly. For example, you will have to say that it must not leak, and whether or not the cover is a seal. I think that would help. I'm not asking you to set out the details. For example, under certain pressure, it must not leak, and so on and so forth. We are not asking for such minute detail, but then you will have to at least ensure that the cover and the tank must not leak. And also, for those of my constituents who drive RCVs, they like to have a public hearing, because they are of the view that with the opening up of the STTS, all right, at present they are already having to queue up, and if you open it up, then the queues might get longer. So what is going to happen? So they would like to have a public hearing. So with member support, we'd like to do that. Just now, Mr. Gary Chan already proposed that on your behalf, so we already know that. Mr. Chan, yes, with regard to the suggestions by members in terms of the functionality of the devices, whether or not we should use stronger words, we'll go back and take a look. Mr. Raymond Chen. Thank you, Chairman. About the legislative timetable in para 19, we've been told that we will decide on the commencement date for the new RCV equipment standards, taking into account the progress of the retrofitting scheme and also the commencement of the SENT landfill extension. So let's say if the FC doesn't approve the funding for the SENT extension, then what is going to happen to this? That's the first question. Second is about the odor problem in para 6. You said that with the implementation of a basket of measures, the situation has already improved. So can you give us more details? So are you saying that there are fewer complaints, or do you have any objective scientific data to let us know that the situation has improved? And thirdly, probably I'm not familiar with this, and forgive me for being stupid. All right, the landfill can only accept construction waste, and then the inert material must not be more than half of the weight of the waste. So that's on note 5 on page 4. But then how come under 18A you talk about construction waste that contains no more than 50% by weight of inert construction waste? What does that mean, Mr. Chen? Well, if you look at the waste diversion scheme, we have to tie that in with other waste disposal strategy. That's why for the 3 existing landfills, their expansion is a very important part of the comprehensive plan. That's why we hope that members will accept our full package.
So if a part of the plan cannot be implemented, then we will need to reconsider the whole plan and see whether the diversion plan needs to be amended. So can I only approve your funding for landfills then? In paragraph 19 is talking about not just about the expansion of landfills, but also other measures, including the readjustment or alignment of collection routes and other relevant issues before the date the law comes into effect is decided upon. But as for the retrofitting of the refuse vehicles, because the proposal has reached the Finance Committee, and that is an alleviation measure, so that is something that we need to push for. And as for other data and the definition issues, we can provide you with further information later on. May I ask my colleague to supplement? Yeah, for construction waste, there are 3 types of them. Actually, there is waste that actually can be recycled, and there are also other types of waste that will go to screening facilities to identify materials that can be reused. And the rest that have no recycling value will be sent to landfills for disposal. And paragraph 18 may have some conflict with the version in the Chinese document. So we look into that. Actually, for a material that cannot be recycled, they would need to go to landfill for disposal at a cost of $128. Emily Lau, next. I agree that we do need to hold a public hearing. I think people in the trade or the public would like to come to express their views. I hope that you can arrange for that. And then members talk about the design of vehicles. We had told you long ago about the design for more than 10 years. Apart from the design, I think even the rubbish truck also need to be better equipped so that rubbish will not fall off the truck. Lower Park residents told us that they've seen these trash carrying truck, having even a whole mattress falling off from it. As for odor, Chairman, I understand that the government wants to address complaints from residents in Chengquan. Oh, I'm sure you may not even have found the source of the odor. All I know is there is this odor coming from somewhere, not necessarily from the landfills. But can you tell the residents you're taking your rubbish to New Territories East? The residents have asked us, will there be odor problem there in New Territories West? So you do need to address this issue of odor. Are you going to shift the problem to New Territories West? Can you give us a more concrete guarantee that there will be no environmental nuisance cost in Tuen Mun? Chairman, as for the problem of odor, the diversion scheme is intended to handle or to address the issue of odor, because in the Southeast New Territories landfill, once the regulation comes into effect, it will not accept municipal solid waste, and it will only accept construction waste, and that means that odor problem there will be improved. And as for the refuse transfer vehicles, once the additional equipment is installed, then the odor problem will be reduced. The diversion plan is also intended to encourage trade to send waste to waste transfer stations where the waste will be compacted and be sealed and transported by sea. That means they would not be transported on vehicles. By sea, with the sealed containers there would not cause odor either, or any falling off of rubbish. So in other words, the number of vehicles going into and out of landfills will be reduced, and that's the spirit of the diversion plan. Emily Lau just then mentioned about the issue of rubbish falling off refuse collection vehicles. Our plan today actually targets at vehicles where waste is compacted. And our latest proposal also targets vehicles without the necessary equipment. So we will ask these vehicles to be equipped when they're carrying the compacted waste with the additional equipment. The odor problem will be resolved. And also, if the rubbish falling off from vehicles on the streets under existing regulation, legal action can be taken. So that's an issue of law enforcement, and we will liaise with the law enforcement authority to try to prevent refuse vehicles from actually having waste falling off the vehicles. Chairman, LegCo has asked you for more than a decade whether we could make it a rule that the vehicles can be wrapped. I'm sure the Tray has opposing views. But can't you make it a law that all these vehicles have to be wrapped so that no rubbish will fall off the vehicles? And the administration also told us that waste is compacted and put in container, and odor can be reduced. If that's the case, then why can't you leave the waste in Tseung Kwan O? I'm not saying residents there will agree to it, but if you said the entire process would handle the waste, the odor issue, then why do you need to transfer the waste to another area? Well, the waste will only be compacted at the refuse collection transfer stations. But in Tseung Kwan O, there's no such transfer station where the waste can be compacted. Therefore, the diversion plan is here to make sure that solid waste aimed for neutral to southeast would be sent elsewhere instead. So you're saying that the waste will be compacted in the transfer station and the odor would be reduced, but when they are disposed of at the site, odor will still occur. Let me supplement. At the transfer station, there is a wet process under which the waste will be compacted and the wastewater will be treated. So these kinds of waste will become drier. But the waste in Tseung Kwan O is left untreated, and therefore there's this odor. We've also considered that Tseung Kwan O landfill is very close to residential areas, whereas Tuen Mun or the North District landfill is farther away from residential areas. Therefore, we need to consider these factors first, and therefore we decided that it's better to have the waste transported by sea from the transfer station. Chairman, can you consider why can't we have the waste collection vehicles wrapped so that no rubbish or waste will fall off the vehicle, or have the vehicle enclosed? I know that we can't let waste fall off the vehicle, but whether we can have the whole vehicle enclosed. But we're talking about various types of vehicles here. For construction waste and other non-municipal solid waste, they are transported for different types of vehicles. So we need to think of the, whether it's feasible when it comes to implementation and what the trade thinks. But the current spirit is that no matter what type of vehicle it is, the operators are obliged to make sure that the waste is properly packaged or wrapped. So let me clarify. Now we have 5 lorries on the streets, which is entirely open, where waste are put on them. But is it under the new regulation? This kind of open air lorries carrying waste cannot be operated anymore. Now this regulation targets collection vehicles with the compression machine or compact machine. But my understanding is that for other types of lorries, they carry dry goods or waste. Therefore, they would not have this odor or wastewater problem. But we would deal with these sort of municipal solid waste vehicles handling, this particular kind of waste first. So I think you need to give us a paper telling us how serious the situation is. We often see lorries, collecting rubbish from the streets that are not enclosed at all. So please give us some information on how what sort of problem those vehicles may have caused. Okay, next one is Chen Wei-Chen. Just that is that the vehicle the waste collection vehicles that the regulation targets at actual targets at these vehicles that handle waste to be compacted. But I think we've also seen vehicles or lorries that collect other types of waste. But I think so. Your current regulation, even though if it targets at waste that can be compacted, but the whole purpose is to prevent any waste from falling to the ground. So you can still impose regulations to make sure that, all types of waste carrying trucks are enclosed or wrapped, so that the chances of waste falling off a vehicle can be minimized, because even one incident can be serious, could have serious consequence. As Emily Lau said, we have been pushing for it for more than a decade, and I mentioned that before myself as well. And secondly, we talk a lot about road transportation, but is it that no problem would be caused at all in sea transportation because the waste has been compacted, and there will be no waste falling into the sea? But I'd like to find out for sea transport, whether the ships are so properly equipped that no issue or no problem will occur. And also in paragraph 14 of the paper, you're proposing that for charging a low fee of $30 per ton. Why this level of $30? What is your rationale? Why is it not 25? Thank you. Administration, thank you. I think for the transportation of construction waste, there's another interdepartmental working group that's looking into the issue. Maybe I can, following the meeting, provide you with further information on the work being done. As for whether we can wrap up the entire, vehicle traveling carrying waste that can be compacted, we will look into that as well. And as for sea transportation, so far, sea transportation of waste is operating smoothly because at the refuse transfer stations, the waste is already compacted and put in sealed containers. Then they are loaded onto the ships for transport to landfills. So during the process, the wastewater has already been treated. So by the time the waste is sent to the landfill, the waste is dry, and the waste and odor problem will be much reduced. Therefore, sea transportation is a more ideal option, and it can also avoid causing nuisance to road traffic or to nearby residents. As for the issue of fee, may I ask my colleague to supplement? For each refuge transfer station, fee level varies. This time, we think that the West Kowloon and East-West and also Sha Tin transfer stations will be most affected under the plan. And we know that of the 4 transfer stations, West Kowloon charges $30. I hope that the private collectors would actually not be affected by fee levels when it comes to which transfer station they want to go to. Therefore, we want to have a uniform fee.
以呢一個為一準則咧，對。
And if that's the criteria, then with regard to the operation of the trade and also for the diversion, a balance can be struck. That's why we have come up with this proposal. I'd just like to say that charging is one of the factors to be considered, but then the routing and also the way the refuse is collected and also the distance of the journey will also be factors affecting their operation in determining the fee level, or else because of the location, whether or not it might save fuel and so on, some of the operators might prefer to go to a particular landfill or a particular transfer station. So have you taken that into consideration in determining the rate so that a particular RTS would not be subject to higher or lower pressure? We don't want to have an imbalanced use of those RTS. Yes, before you came, we had already asked the administration to provide further details in order to determine whether or not the fee levels are appropriate. So I'm afraid we will have to wait till the paper is available before we can comment further on that. Ms. Sito, with regard to the make of the vehicle, apparently you are regulating the vehicles but not the drivers or the people involved. So, well, for on whether or not the vehicles are leaking and so on, you will carry out the inspection and so on. But then have you heard about this? I've heard that before. Because for the drivers, even if the vehicle does have this leachate tank or some tank, well, as they move around, they would just open up the lid so that the leachate can be all over the place, so that the vehicle can be less heavy by the time when they reach the RTS, and then they'll pay less. So if you just regulate the structure of the vehicle, even if they have been retrofitted with such devices, it doesn't mean that that will never happen, because it doesn't mean that the people concerned will use them. That's why, according to some in the trade, well, they are concerned if the people would also be regulated so that they would not be allowed to discharge the wastewater everywhere. If you litter, then you will be fined $5,000, and if a driver deliberately does that, then of course he'll be fined. But what if he just discharges the leachate? Then will there be regulation to regulate this? And also, if you look at the policy objective, the purpose is to divert the waste from Tseung Kwan O. So 1,800 tons will be diverted from Tseung Kwan O. So I'd like to know, with regard to municipal solid waste, the 2080 TPD, where has it come from? If it's from West Kowloon or Sha Tin, then if you open the Sha Tin facility to more people to use it, will it help in diverting some of the refuse from Tseung Kwan O? And then for West Kowloon, if it's to be diverted to the Hong Kong Island, then they will have to cross the harbour. Will they be using the cross harbour tunnel, or will they be using the marine route to transfer it to the two facilities on Hong Kong Island? And then again, the refuse will be transported to NT. So it's not just about lowering the fees for the two facilities on the island, because we are trying to reduce the waste going to Tseung Kwan O, and then at the same time we also have to look at the source of such waste. From West Kowloon, how would they be transported to Island East and Island West? And in the process, will that cause more problems and nuisance along the route? Alright, if it has to go to West Kowloon, but then it's not going to go direct to Tseung Kwan O. Instead, it will go by sea to Hong Kong West. So, and then they'll go to NT Northwest. So next time you will have to give us the route plan. Can it be done? Yes, sure, Chairman. Alright, after being transported to the RTS, they will go to the landfill right away. So it will not be transported from one RTS to another RTS, but then we'll be giving the details next time. The reason why I brought this up, that's because if you look at the waste from Kowloon, alright, in West Kowloon, there is only one RTS. I can imagine that for the entire Kowloon, all right, that's the only RTS, and then if they go to Sha Tin, that would be the shortest distance. But then for the entire refuse from Kowloon, if they go to West Kowloon, and then they'll have to go to NT East, so how is it going to be diverted? So we will also have to consider moving it from RTS to RTS. It doesn't necessarily have to go to the landfill, because in the past, well, for refuse going to Chiang Kwan O, very often it would be direct, so they would not be transported to the RTS. But then because of the arrangement, now they're trying to attract more vehicles to the RTS instead. So the administration will have to provide the relevant route plan and also the projection and so on, so that would not give rise to further problems, because after working so hard, in the end you just end up having more vehicles running around in the streets. Because in para 7 they said that for the SENT landfill they are receiving some 4,800, and then some 4,080 would be MSW, and then for such MSW, how much of it will go directly to the RTS and before going to the landfill? So can you also give us that detail? Because after going to the WKTS, in fact they can take another trip by sea to Island West, or you can directly go to NT West. So can the administration tell us more about this? For the marine route capacity from West Kowloon, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to go to Chiang Kwan O. You can directly go to NT West by sea. So is there any direct transfer to the SENT landfill? All right, for the 2,080 tons of MSW, it goes to the SENT landfill, and out of that 270 is collected by the FEHD and its contractors, so they will replan their route, and that will also be diverted. So what we are dealing with is about 1,800 TPD collected by private collectors, and at present they are transporting it to SCNT landfill, and after the rerouting they'll be going to WKTS and also the STTS. That's why we try to lower the fees for those two facilities so that they would be on a par with the WKTS, and some of that would also go to Kowloon East and Island West. It depends, but then mainly that's for the FEHD and its contractors, and they will have to be diverted to Island East and Island West. Ms. Ho, then for the 1,800 tons, you try to divert them, so not all of them are from the RTS, correct? So they are actually being sent to the SENT landfill. So they are the MSW directly transferred to the SENT landfill. Because looking at the paper, probably I might not have read it very carefully, and probably it has not been set up very clearly, because you talk about 1,800 TPD of MSW will be diverted to West Kowloon and also the Sha Tin facility. But then whether or not it's sourced at Sha Tin and the other facility, so that's not clear. Well, actually they'd like to make use of the unused capacity of the WKTS, so that for the 1,800 tons of waste being transported to the SENT landfill, it will be diverted to these facilities, if I understand it correctly. Correct. So Ms. Ho's earlier point about regulating the vehicle but not the people. So what are you going to do? Because in the course of transporting the waste to the landfill, because the waste will be weighed, so if they are able to reduce the water content, then they will be paying less. I think they understand it. You don't have to repeat that for them. All right, I'll ask my colleague to supplement. Well, earlier on, a few members also asked about this. At present, under the regulation, the objective is that other than the hardware's design, we also have to make sure that the devices are in good working condition. So that's one of the considerations. But then other members have also referred to this. What's the what are the details of the guideline, and will they measure the functionality or otherwise of these devices and so on? So we'll be providing further information next time. I'd like to clarify. All right. Well, who will be held liable? The owner, the company, or the driver? Well, in the drafting, the user of the RTS or the landfill will be held liable. All right, any further questions from members? Yes, Elizabeth Squad. Sorry, I was engaged in other meetings. That's why I was late. If my question has been asked already, so Chairman, please do let me know. There is no need to repeat that because I can just review the archive. Yes, you have tabled this before us, and you'd like to join this subcommittee. If members have no objections, then we'd like to welcome Elizabeth Quart for joining the subcommittee. All right, please continue. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd also like to know this with regard to the amendment to the RTS regulation. We understand that it originates from the older problem at the Changquano landfill, and the administration has come up with this piece of legislation, and the purpose is to ensure that for non-domestic waste, only non-domestic waste can be transported to the Changquano landfill after the amendment. Is that right? And then in the implementation process, after the enactment and commencement of the legislation, so when will it commence? Will it be commenced right away after the enactment? Has that been asked? No. So I'd like to know, when is it going to commence? That would tie in with the SENT landfill expansion. Is that the case? Or are you saying that with the amendment regulation, all right, it can be enacted? So even without the expansion, it will still come into effect. In the paper, it is already set out that the commencement date will align with the expansion of the SENT landfill. So can you ask the administration to further clarify it? Yes, Chairman. As we have set out in para 19 of the paper, it really depends on the SENT landfill extension as well as other measures, because we will have to talk to the FEHD and its contractors and also the private collectors. We will have to work out the plan, that is the diversion plan, with all of the stakeholders, and also for the retrofitting of the RCVs, they will also have to be completed before that can commence operation. So as said today, we have no idea as to when it will commence operation. But then have you sounded that out with the trade? All right, they've been looking into the retrofitting program and so on. So when do you expect it to come into operation? Because I don't want to see the legislation being enacted, but then for the commencement date, it will only be 3 or 5 years down the road. No, that should not be the case. We expect that if this is enacted by this council by early next year, and then for the retrofitting plan, we also expect that to be completed in the first quarter of 2015. And then for the rerouting plan, I don't think that would take very long before we work out the details with the trade. So we are talking about 2014-15 that should come into operation. And of course, there are different measures. For example, the retrofitting of the RCVs, and also for the SENT landfill accepting only construction waste. They will be commencing operation at different times once they are ready. All right, you will have to retrofit the vehicle so that they would be leak-proof. But then that has nothing to do with the refusal of Changquano landfill in accepting MSW. Yes, in terms of the retrofitting of the RCVs, we'll be doing that full steam. So you do that first. Yes, for the retrofitting, it will go ahead anyway. But then whatever the timetable is, you will continue or you will press ahead with this. Yes, for the retrofitting of the vehicles, that will go ahead no matter what. All right. I'd just like to ask one small point. All right, Mr. Lai, you said that for the RTS, they will compact the waste, and that will already help to reduce the odor. So can you tell us more? When they go to other landfills, all the waste should also be compacted first, or will you continue to allow them to do this? For example, for Tuen Mun RCVs, they can directly dump the refuse into the landfill. or dump the refuse into the landfill? Chairman, that would be somewhat difficult because for the existing RTS, the capacity is limited. As you can see from the chart, there is a shortage of capacity. But then, as we have said in the paper, in the long run, we have to increase the number of RTS, in particular to the east of Hong Kong territory. So, with regard to the RTS system, we do want to expand the system. And we hope that most of the waste would be compacted first in the RTS before being transported to the landfills. But then, at present, the network can only cope with the existing load. But then, in the long run, we hope that that can be done. But then, at the present moment, it's somewhat difficult. Do you have a blueprint and a roadmap for us?
設施嚟嘅。
So transfer station is a kind of logistic facility. So whether waste goes to landfills or transfer station, which is more feasible, we will consider the journey, the length of journey involved. And also, through our latest proposal, the utilization rate of transfer station will be up to 90%. And we're also making plans for other transfer stations. So we hope to come up with new plans as soon as possible. So I hope you can give us a timetable and the map of routes. Ms. Quat, I'd like to ask about the Sha Tin transfer station. In paragraph 11 of the paper, it says that the Sha Tin transfer station is only at 80% capacity now, and you may want to redevelop it so that it can have a better utilization rate. So can you tell us what are you going to do at the Sha Tin transfer station? And after it's redeveloped, would it have any impose any pressure on transport in the nearby area? Well, Chairman, we have no plans to redevelop the Sha Tin transfer station, but now the Sha Tin transfer station is only used by contractors and FVHD. So one of the objectives of the latest regulation or amendment is to open up the Sha Tin transfer station to private operators, and the FVHD and its contractors may go to other transportations with a lower utilization rate. As for the capacity at the Sha Tin station, it will remain unchanged. For Sha Tin transfer station, for its capacity to be full, we would not actually allow it to accommodate an extra amount of waste that's beyond its capacity. Okay, thank you. We've had a meeting for more than an hour. If there are no other questions, I will do a summary. At the meeting, many members have asked for concrete information, including your route plans and how you're going to assess the effectiveness of the regulations. And also questions were raised on the guidelines of the for the equipment. And there is also members who asked that there should be a public hearing held. So members, do you have any objection? If not, then the Secretary has proposed 2 time slots, 19th, 4:30 in the afternoon, or December 23rd, 2:30. I propose December 19th because I've got other meetings on the 23rd. Is the 19th good for the other members? December 19th, a Thursday, 4:30 in the afternoon. I think 4:30 may be okay for me. When can we come back on that day? After our visit. You know, we are going to visit the transfer station, right? If we can be back here at 4:45, then that's fine. How about early January? When's the latest we can have the hearing? By the latest. We have actually delay a resolution till January 22nd. So in the afternoon of December 23rd is fine with me. Well, I have a meeting at the same time. Okay, how about early January 2nd? Any other time slots? Chairman, I think of course we do need a public hearing, but the clause-by-clause scrutiny, particularly on the requirements on the equipment, we can start work on that first. You know, Section 3B in the regulation, we can scrutinize that provision first. So we don't need to begin our scrutiny till after we've had our public hearing. Okay, as for the clause-by-clause scrutiny, I think we will have another meeting in a short period of time, and we look at the relevant papers first, and then after our discussion, we will have the scrutiny. So we look at the papers first. So in that case, we should have our next meeting on the 19th, right? Yes, we can have a meeting on December 19th. But for the public hearing, we need to make sure that we'll be available to attend the hearing. We have to go on a visit, right? So, well, there's another time slot, December 30th, 2:30, December 30th. Will you be in Hong Kong? Well, many of us won't be in Hong Kong. Okay, let's delay it to, well, January 2nd is okay. How about January 2nd, a Thursday, 2:30? Okay, 2:30. That's the day for the public hearing, right? Yes. Sit home? Okay. Well, January 2nd, 2:30 in the afternoon, we'll have the public hearing. And on the 19th, can the administration prepare the papers in time for us? Okay. We'll try. December 19th, we'll have a meeting to go through the papers submitted by the administration. So we'll actually arrange a time and see when the room will be available here. I don't have the information here. After I think most likely is most of our members will have visited the Sha Tin transfer station then. So maybe by 5 p.m. we should be able to attend the meeting. Well, I won't be able to make it. Okay. Okay, we'll be back here. Will 5 p.m. be too late for you? Or maybe we can deal with the papers on the 23rd. Or I can still liaise with the Secretariat. Please, okay, liaise with the Secretariat again on what rooms are available. So I think we'll adjourn the meeting today. Thank you.